recording. Good evening. This is the November 16th meeting of the Mansfield Conservation Commission. It's a virtual meeting, as we have been for quite some time. If I can do a quick roll call and just quickly just say if you're present, please. Miranda Davis.
Present.
Aaron King.
Present.
John Seilander.
Present.
Chad Rittenhouse, our secretary.
Present.
Meg Harper.
Present.
James Knighton.
Present.
I believe we're only missing Will. Is that correct? 1, 2, 7. Yes. I am.
I have one question before we get started. Is that all right?
Sure.
I had thought maybe the meetings going forward were going to be in person, and I was just curious about virtual versus in person going forward.
That's I made that sort of an executive decision. It's much right now, while we're short of staff, it's a lot easier for me to kind of manage these meetings virtually. But going forward, when we have a new staff member, it will be, if the commission wants to go, it has to be hybrid. So we'll have you go hybrid. But so sorry for the confusion on that. It's been a little bit hectic since June. So, but
That's fine. Thanks. I just wanted.
sure.
So sort of a interim convenience.
Yeah.
So that works. Okay. Let me get back to our agenda. We have minutes from not from our we did have a special meeting last month, I think. So we're just going back a meeting just to give everybody the context, back to our September 21st. If anybody has comments on the minutes as they've been written, feel free to speak up or make a motion to accept them as written.
So moved.
Thank you, Chad. We have a second on that.
Second.
Thanks, Miranda. Does anybody want to not vote in favor of the minutes or abstain? Otherwise, I'll assume that it's a unanimous vote to accept the minutes.
I'll probably just abstain since I wasn't there.
Okay, so Aaron will abstain. Does anybody else have any voting in opposition or abstentions? No. Okay. Great. Thank you. I apologize. I'm looking at one screen, so I'm just sort of clicking back and forth between our documents and seeing you all. So if you have a hand up or I'm missing a social cue, just let me know. Okay, so that was our item 2A. We're now on item 3, opportunity for public comment. Is anybody here to comment under this? Oh, hi, Will. Now we also have Will here. Hi, Will. And that's okay. No, that's no problem. So just to back up a little bit, everybody here, I believe, is a voting member besides James. Jennifer, do I have that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so no one here for our public comment period. Item 4A is our conservation easement monitoring under old business. We did sort of tentatively have a field trip or an idea to go out, I think in November. With the new role that Jennifer's in, we just kind of couldn't put that together in time. So, those are still visits that we want to get out and try to do, especially when the leaves are off right now. So I don't know if December for me can be a little bit crunched on the weekends, just because I have some other obligations in December. But are folks interested in getting out for easement monitoring in the next, 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
I am.
Aaron, okay. What dates let's see, we're on the,
First or second weekend of December work best for me. Either of the days.
okay. That second weekend of December, I would be available, the 10th, 11th. Is anybody else available on the 3rd and 4th, or the 10th and 11th?
I could do 10th, 11th. 3rd and 4th is Nutcracker weekend, so no.
Thank you for pointing that out. So, that whole weekend is shut down. Okay, so Jennifer, do you think we have time to work on that weekend, December 10th, 11th, for a visit somewhere?
I'll do my best. I'll see if I can delegate that to Sandy, but we have to do the research and all of that. I would not be able to coordinate that for you guys at this point.
Yeah.
I need to focus my energy on like this application. So,
Right.
so that's, those are the things, but I will do my best. And if I can, I'll get something out to you. I think Sandy Ferran from my office who's great, can probably help do some of this work.
Okay, if you and I need to talk outside of the meeting about how I can help Sandy on that, so I don't know if
It's
there's
an
anything I can
administrative thing.
do.
You have to research the conservation easements and the mailing out, all that stuff, make sure that that's publicly noticed. It takes about an hour to,
Okay.
by the time I do all the steps. So, and yeah, so
Do we have a site, we have a location in mind already? So it's just a matter of going forward on
I'll
it?
have to look at the map. Yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, so
The
we'll
good news
tentatively
is
plan.
that the job has been internally posted and it will go out on the street externally on Friday. So maybe by January, we'll have a replacement, which would be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Okay, take some pressure off you finally after
Mhm.
months and months and months of wearing multiple hats. Do we want to pick a day? Is there a preference for people about that?
Why don't we do Saturday with a rain date on Sunday like I normally do? Does that
Okay.
make sense?
It's great.
And if it comes together, I'm available that weekend.
That'd be great.
Unfortunately, I'm in New York City that weekend, so I'm not available.
All right.
I'm really booked these next few weekends. I'm sorry.
We'll keep going. Don't worry. There's no shortage. You'll get another chance.
Plenty of opportunities.
Oh, gosh. Okay, great. Thank you. So on to item 5A under new business. This is application W 1625-1, application of CPH Mansfield LLC for regulated activities associated with a mixed use project at 106 stores. So do we have folks here representing the applicant or the applicant to
Yeah, I'll do a brief.
introduce the project?
I'll
Okay.
do a brief introduction. You've got here Matt Bruton, who is the from BL, who is the applicant's team, applicant's engineer. And also you have Eric Davison, who is the applicant's wetland scientist. You've got Steve Trinkhouse, who is reviewing the stormwater for the town for both planning and zoning and wetlands. Jim McManus is doing the wetlands peer review for the town of Mansfield, and Jessica Bates, who Matt, maybe you could introduce Jessica. I know we've met once or twice, but
Jessica is a principal engineer at BL that was also part of the design.
great, thank you. So I'll let Matt kind of go through the project, and Matt, it would be great if you could share your screen and just sort of review the plans. You did a great job when you presented to the Economic Development Commission, and he even used color, which was great.
No problem, Jennifer. Mr. Chairman, if you're ready for me to go, I'm happy to take control and kind of walk you through the project.
Yeah,
You
thank
have
you. Please.
permission, yeah.
Okay. All right. So just getting for the record, my name is Matthew Bruton. I'm an engineer, professional engineer at BL Companies out of our Hartford office here on behalf of our applicant, CPH Mansfield LLC, for the redevelopment of 106 Stores Road. I'm just going to use Google real quick, and then I'll jump into the plans. So this is an existing property, I said, at 106 Stores Road, approximately a little over 5 acres at the moment, currently occupied by Champagne Motors. So you can see from the aerial here, obviously, the white area is the existing car dealership. You can see the surrounding kind of parking on all three sides there. In general, right, from a butter standpoint, McDonald's to the north, Eastbrook Mall and Storage Road here to the left, to the west, Shopping Plaza to the south, which Staples and Petco, and then we have to the east is the wetland area, and then beyond that, single-family residential on Riverview Road. I'm sure you're all familiar, but I'll just give you obviously a shot of the property from street view before I jump over to the plans. So I'm sure this looks familiar to all. So bringing up the plans here. Plan I have in front of you now is the existing condition survey. So just for orientation wise, Storage Road is obviously across the bottom of the screen. Proposed building, or sorry, the existing building, existing car dealership is just roughly, I'm outlining in green, it's approximately 20,000 square feet. There's a single access driveway where my hand is hovering right now. And obviously parking, majority of it to the front on either side, with a little bit wrapping around to the back of the building. And general topography varies from 175 feet to as low as 163 feet. High point kind of being at the corner here adjacent to the Staples shopping district, shopping plaza, and then the low point being towards the rear, obviously where the wetlands are. Wetlands, for the majority of them are off of our property. They're actually on the residential properties to the rear of our development, but they do cross over as they come towards the McDonald's. So I'll just highlight real quick where they are in this plan, just for clarity. So as you can see, obviously the majority in this area are off residential, and as they kind of come back towards McDonald's, they sneak into the corner of this property here. Move forward to our proposed plans. Sorry. All right, so proposed conditions here. So the goal is for Champagne Motors to remain on the property, but it'll be significantly reduced. So I'll just highlight it for you quickly here. The goal of Champagne Motors is to reduce the overall size of their building, but still maintain the services that they do provide now, obviously selling cars, and then obviously doing the necessary repairs. So as I said, it was about a 8,000 square foot reduction, leaving about 12,000 square feet on the property. In addition to that, their driveway will remain the same along here. Storage Road is still along the bottom of the page for orientation, with some parking reconfigured along the front and side, with expansion of parking towards the rear. On the right-hand side of the property, where the Champagne Motors is being demolished, I'll just show you roughly where that is in red here. This is the portion that's being demolished. We're looking to add a new mixed-use development that would have a mix of 3 different tenants, 2 restaurants, and 1 dental office, approximately 8,500 square feet. This development would have a new driveway that lines up with the intersection to the Eastbrook Mall, currently a signalized intersection that has 3 legs, obviously left and right on this page for Storrs Road, and then 1 traffic signal facing the Eastbrook Mall. We would be looking to upgrade that signal to provide another head that faces our proposed development. So you can see roughly where my hand is here would be a secondary entrance to the property for this development, but there is interconnectivity between the properties as well. This will all remain under same ownership, just 2 different really condo units. Just to point out too, obviously Storrs Road is a DOT road. So a lot of these improvements in terms of striping, signalization, crosswalks, things of that nature do need to go to DOT for review and approval. Some also site features that we're proposing, I'll just point out here. We're proposing sidewalk along the frontage of the property. There's currently none on this side, so this will hopefully be the first domino to fall to eventually the redevelopment of other parcels along this for the walkability of the site. We do show connections to both of the developments for connectivity to those sidewalks. In addition to that, we do show patios along the front of the mixed-use development for the guests for eating. We also show a bike rack as well for an alternative mode of transportation for visitors to the site. Well, one of the restaurants has a pickup window. It's not a drive-through; it's a pickup, the pre-order pickup window. So we do show loading and queuing along the back of the building with the pickup window where my hand is hovering here. We also do show a loading area as well, and we do show some dumpster enclosure areas towards the rear of the building. Jump forward to our grading and drainage. Sorry, a little bit of a cold. My toddlers pay me back from going to daycare every day. So the existing site has a very limited stormwater management system. It's really basically catch basins and piping that directly discharge to the wetlands, roughly in this vicinity here. So obviously we're looking to make some significant improvements as part of the redevelopment and using the town regulations as guidelines along with Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual and 2002 Erosion and Sedimentation Control Manual. So I'll kind of talk about these in kind of two different phases. So I'll talk about Champagne Motors, then I'll talk about the mixed use side. So Champagne Motors is obviously a retrofit. We're touching less of this property, but we still try to make improvements to improve how stormwater management is done on the property. So there's a lot of existing catch basins and piping that will remain, but we're adding additional catch basins with deep sumps and hoods. We're adding offline hydrodynamic separators, and we're adding a subsurface detention system and an infiltration system. So just roughly in general, all the water on this side of the property flows directly back to the wetland here. This line is getting retrofitted with offline hydrodynamic separators, and the expansion as well in the rear for the additional parking spaces for the cars is getting treated through the variety of devices that I just listed. So obviously you can see the underground systems in these two locations here with an eventual discharge that matches the existing discharge from the existing property. On the mixed use side, we have a little bit different scheme here to handle the stormwater management. If you guys have noticed, and I can bring it back up to show you the difference here. As you can see in this corner here, as you head down Storrs Road and towards the Staples Plaza, there's significant grade change from the middle of this intersection to where we want our proposed driveway. So we are going to be raising this site up to match, or to be able to connect directly to that signalized intersection. So stormwater in this area kind of goes in two directions. A small portion of the existing lot in this area was going to Storrs Road, but the majority of it was again flowing back towards the wetland area. So on this side of the development, we do have kind of two different systems, one obviously facing and discharging to Storrs Road, the remaining going back to the wetland. So we have a variety of catch basins, deep sumps and hoods, offline hydrodynamic separators, and subsurface infiltration systems to handle the stormwater that will be associated with a kind of increase in impervious area of the property. So we evaluated existing conditions and proposed conditions for the 1, 2, 10, 25, and 100-year events. Overall, we're maintaining existing drainage patterns, providing water quality improvements, and mitigating peak flow off-site. And then per your town regulations, there's a standard for making sure the proposed 2-year storm has been reduced to less than the pre-development 1-year storm. And that's what we have, and that's how the systems have been sized. So I'll just move forward to the erosion sediment. Utilities first. In general, as I'm sure you're aware, developed area, all utilities are available. So either on site or on the street. So water, sanitary, gas, tel data are all available. So we'll be modifying obviously any connection to the existing Champagne Motors when that portion is demolished to sustain that building and be bringing in new utilities for the mixed use development. Erosion and sedimentation control. Obviously, there's going to be some earthwork here, and the goal is to be able to protect town road, the butters, and more importantly, the wetland to the rear. So we have provided a variety of control measures on site that the contractor should be putting in place prior to starting of work, maintaining throughout the work of the project, and should be maintained until the site is fully stabilized and to the satisfaction of the town. So a bunch of these things I'll just point out to you. We have a construction entrance, silt stacks, silt fences, soil stockpile areas, erosion control blankets, all these devices that will help and aid, and protect, as I said, roads, abutters, wetlands, while the site is being constructed, and should remain in place until everything is stabilized and operating properly. So there's no detrimental effect to the wetlands. Move forward here to the landscape plan. So obviously, the right side of the plan is going to be, a bigger redevelopment than the left-hand side, but nevertheless, we're still providing landscaping improvements for the entire property. Goal obviously is to make it aesthetically pleasing, but also comply with your zoning regulations. So just kind of walk you around some of the features. Obviously, I pointed out the proposed sidewalk along the front of the site. We're pairing that with a variety of street trees and shrubs. On the right-hand side, we get into a lot of interior landscaped islands with trees, shrubs, and grasses. That continues around the perimeter of the parking as well, and along the redeveloped parking spaces behind Champagne Motors. I'll point out, in addition to that, wall as part of the development towards the rear here as well, to minimize the incursion into the upland review area. We do show we're obviously trying to maintain the existing vegetation to the rear of the lot, and we are also adding a fence along the rear as well to complement the naturally existing buffer back there, but also adding a fence as well from a safety standpoint and a buffering standpoint. So, Mr. Chairman, that's a high-level overview of the plans. I'm happy to have Eric Davison speak to his investigation on the wetland delineation, and then we're happy to answer any questions you guys may have. So, Eric, are you there?
Yeah, can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Eric Davison. I'm a wetland scientist, soil scientist, and wildlife biologist, Davison Environmental. Just a quick summary of what we've done on the site. We delineated the wetlands in March of 2021. We did some wetland evaluation in the fall of November, I think in November of 2021, to evaluate, just do a basic wetlands functions and values assessment. And in that assessment, we identified the potential for some vernal pools in the bordering wetland east of the site. And so we sort of tabled that initial assessment and did a vernal pool assessment this past spring, and then did a subsequent report that tied delineation, the wetland functions and values assessment, and the vernal pool survey all together. So I believe I'm assuming you have a copy of that report. It was dated August 29th of 2022. As Matt said, there's just one wetland system on the east side of the site. Most of the wetland actually occurs off-site to the east and behind the subdivision that is on Riverview Drive. It's one continuous wetland system. It does extend a little bit to the north and extends a significant distance to the south. To the north, just off-site, the wetland essentially ends. There's no feeder stream or wetland system. It's really just fed by runoff from surrounding development. The only area that's directly draining to the site with a surface discharge to the wetland from the site with a surface discharge is a pipe that outlets right around wetland flag 13. Maybe Matt can elaborate on the source, but I'm not certain we ever determined the exact source of that pipe. But based on what's at the outlet, which is a significant amount of sediment and trash, it's likely that source is road runoff. The wetland on the bordering the southeast portion of the site, there's a large offsite pond. It's a human-made pond, based on the fact that it's a fairly perfect circle, and it has an earthen berm on the southern end. So it was clearly created, probably historically, for some type of perhaps a farm use, for livestock or for crops or something. But it's basically a small circular pond. It, as I said, it has an earthen berm on the southern end. That earthen berm has been breached, and so the pond is basically in a flow-through condition. It has about a foot or two of standing water, depending on the season and and whether there was a recent storm event. And at the northern end of the pond, there's a pretty significant sediment delta that appears to be sourced from that road runoff. It appears to be road sand type material that's formed a sediment delta in the northern end of the pond. And you can see that in the photographs that I included in my report. There's also a detailed description of the pond in my report, along with all the vegetation that we observed in and around the pond. It is permanently flooded, and does support a number of aquatic pond species, most of them common or invasive aquatic plants like watercress. So nothing significant in terms of the pond vegetation. Moving south, once you go south of the pond outlet, there's a very large forested wetland that extends south and then east, and that all borders along the west side of the Natchog River. That system is pretty interesting in the sense that you can see on the north side of Route 6, some of those large wetland systems appear to be old oxbow features just based on the shape of those wetlands. In terms of the vernal pool survey, again, we identified the potential for vernal pool, or we couldn't rule out the potential for vernal pools merely because the pond had hydrology that could support amphibian breeding. It's not seasonally flooded like a classic vernal pool, but it's permanently flooded, and so it could support vernal pool indicator species. So we did that survey in March. We did not find vernal pool activity in the pond. The only thing breeding in the pond were green frog, which is a common amphibian that occurs statewide and most typically in disturbed habitats that are permanently flooded. It has a multi-year life cycle, larval life cycle, so it requires permanent flooding. During the survey, in the initial parts of the survey, we went out and did chorusing surveys. In other words, we listened for chorusing frogs when we knew that the wood frogs would be actively conducting breeding choruses just based on what we were seeing at other pools we were surveying statewide. So we went and surveyed the pond, heard no chorusing, but I did hear chorusing off to the distance in that southeast system where I had mentioned there was, looked like old relic oxbow features. So I traced that chorusing down, found one adult in an area that was not suitable breeding habitat, but it, led me to believe that if there's one, there's more. So on the subsequent visit, we searched and found a vernal pool in that wetland system that's basically south of Riverview Drive, or Riverview Road, and north of Route 6. And that vernal pool, I GPS located with a Trimble GPS unit and put that data onto a GIS-based map, which is included in my report, so you can see where that pool is in relation to the property boundary and the site. It's approximately 600 feet away from the site boundary or the edge of the site activity. So it's a pretty significant distance. That vernal pool just had one indicator species, wood frog. I didn't find any salamanders of any kind in the vernal pool or in the on-site pond. So the only indicator species in this whole system that I could find were wood frog, which is what you tend to find in these more stressed systems where the landscape is a bit more developed. The Ambistivin salamanders tend to disappear before the wood frogs do. So, and as I mentioned in my report, I think that's probably a major limiting factor for vernal pool activity on site, is the fact that you've got quite a bit of surrounding development, and the fact that the hydrology is not ideal. Again, it's permanently flooded and supports green frog, which are a pretty fierce competitor for wood frog. So that's the story on the vernal pool. In terms of the upland review area, or the wetland buffer, that lies between the existing building and parking and the wetland, most of that is disturbed. Historically, it is all forested now, mostly with young trees. But when you walk that back wooded area along the edge of the wetland, you can see old fill piles, old cut slopes, old berms. So basically that at some point that whole wetland boundary was manipulated and disturbed, but it is all revegetated now and mostly forested, mostly with mixed hardwoods, a few pines, mostly just typical mixed hardwood species, and a lot of invasive shrubs like burning bush and things. So that's a pretty, decent overview of the wetland conditions. Again, my report talks about functions and values and some of the other things. I don't know. I'm assuming maybe you have some questions. I don't know if there's anything else you want me to go into in detail.
Thanks,
Mr. Chairman,
Eric.
I think just in general, that's our overview. So happy to answer questions. I'm sure you have many.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Eric. Commissioners, anybody have questions for these presenters? Yeah, John.
I have a few questions here. I'm trying to understand on the south end of the property, how much fill is going to be put in there? How much is this going to be raised above its current area?
Yep, great question, John. Let me just move over to the grading and drainage plan to give you some exact numbers. So just give you some context, right? So the majority of obviously Champaign is obviously going to be maintained, so it's a majority on the south side. So the road topography goes from 178, as you can see my hand here, all the way down to 169. So we're, obviously matching existing topography. So roughly in the middle is around 173, and we'll be coming down into the property for a finished floor elevation of 171. If you can see below here, I'll highlight the two numbers for you, right? 171. The existing finished floor elevation of this end of the car dealership is 167.9. We'll call it 168. So there's around 3 feet of elevation change between the existing finished floor building here and the proposed mixed-use building.
And to the south, that's a slope up to the next development. Is that right?
Correct. You're talking about over here where my hand's floating? Yes. Yep. That is a slope up to the Staples Plaza. I'll just show you because this is that slope here. The property line obviously falls towards the bottom of that slope from this view.
And there is some steep contouring in the rear, the east end. Is that right? So that's going to increase the contours at the back end.
No. So let me just show you. I'm going to just go bring you back to the existing conditions survey just to show you. So you can see. Right, obviously, there's quite some tight topography moving this way to the south, but this is relatively flat back here, right? So 164, maybe a high spot of 165. There is, as kind of Eric mentioned, a little berm along off the property adjacent to the wetland in this area, but in general, 1 to 2, 3 feet of elevation change existing currently. If I go back to the proposed site or grading plan, 1 second, want to give anybody a seizure here. We are proposing a retaining wall as part of the back of the development. I'll just quickly highlight it here. So the goal of this is obviously to, as part of the peer reviewer's recommendation, to limit disturbance into the upland review area. So we're looking to maintain the vegetation and the topography in the rear here, and we're using a retaining wall to make sure we don't encroach too far with slopes. In general, that retaining wall obviously height varies, from a few feet maybe up to 7 or 8 feet in some of the higher spots in the corner here.
Matt, just to clarify, does that mean there's 7 to 8 feet of fill in that area where the retaining wall is that high?
So let me get you more specific here. All right, so highlight the wall again on the Champaign side. So in this area here, you can see bottom of wall 164 to 173. So we're roughly, what is that, about 8 feet in that area there, tapering back down to nothing. In this corner over here, we're looking about 5 feet. If I jump over to this side, area here, right, like I said, 5 feet on this side. As you come towards the end here, looking around 7 feet, and then as you can imagine, as we abut up to the Staples Plaza with that slope, we're on the lower side here. Obviously, the high side is Staples. We're around 8 feet here, but tapering down to 1. So around 8 feet is the highest it ever gets.
Okay.
Another question sort of following up on this. There's, a substantial increase in the paved surface here. I presume this is impervious surface here. You're not looking at semi-pervious surface, but is there any way to reduce that sort of bump out parking lot in there? And I'm looking at sort of this very contorted sort of road system that's in there. There must be a more efficient way of doing this without sort of encroaching on the back end and the wetlands. And I'm sort of, based on what the wetland scientist said, this seems to be, remnants of a natural riverine system with some oxbows. It would be nice to be able to preserve this to the extent possible. And certainly this is a vast increase in the amount of parking relative to what is currently a car dealership with lots of parking on it already. So I don't know whether there's a way of reducing that or reconfiguring sort of the contorted road network that's on the property as far as the proposed plan is concerned.
Sure. No, great question. I can walk you through that. Right. So I'm just going to draw a kind of a line down the middle here. So obviously Champaign operations would be on the left-hand side here. A lot of this is being kind of reconfigured at grade parking that you kind of currently see here today. The loss of their building, which kind of overlaps this dividing line, I'll just change the color real quick to something pink. Obviously the loss of the building here and the parking on this side of the lot, they're looking to maintain the functionality of their operation here. So the expansion of the parking really is limited to anything kind of behind this this purple line here. So, this parking area and this parking area are parking spaces that they feel that they need for the successful operation of their business. On the other side, obviously, we are looking. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
What about getting rid of that road sort of behind, and there's an open space, just below the red line there? Yes, all of that.
You're talking about this road here?
Yes. And then moving the parking lot further.
Yep, no, understand. Yep, so the goal of maintaining this roadway here where my hand is floating is to provide interconnectivity between the two properties. Goal obviously is more driven obviously from a safety and a functionality standpoint between the two businesses, but also from a traffic standpoint as well. Not having people leave a property, go down the street 100 yards, and then come back into the property. So from a functionality standpoint, we believe that the roadway connection, a driveway connection between the two sides of the lot is kind of critical to the operations and safety of the site. So I'll continue this purple line here to your questioning. That is roughly the existing extent of the existing pavement behind the building. So this purple line. So anything behind this is an additional impervious area. Obviously, a small portion, well, a portion of that, as you can see from the orange line, is in the upland review area. We did come in, as Eric mentioned, with a different plan prior to the vernal pool study. We had submitted that to the town. I don't think we got as far as this commission, but I do have it here. It was a lot bigger development. We had 4 tenants, 2 drive-throughs, more parking, more dumpster locations, and honestly, we were staying out of the wetland, but we basically we're clearing almost the entire lot, based on feedback from the town, some of the site walks, and consultation with Eric, or and then peer reviewers. The revised application in front of you has been, dialed back significantly to, provide the needs of the business, but also hopefully respect the wetland resource to the rear of the property.
I have a few other questions, so maybe I'll let other commission members chime in if they have any.
Go ahead, Chad, and then Aaron.
Okay, I was going to stay on this figure here. And I have a similar question as what John raised about this expanded parking. And I understand, trying to maintain functionality and use of the 2 buildings while providing, sorry, I have a cold as well, connectivity between them. But who's envisioned to be parking in those lots? Will it be the folks that are using the mixed use buildings, or will it be Champagne Motors folks? And I'm asking the question because it's a substantial increase in impervious surface proximate to the wetlands, and the parking is almost entirely within the upland review area. And I'm not seeing walkways that connect those parking lots to the mixed use development. So I'm wondering what their purpose is, what the intended purpose is.
Absolutely. Great question, Mr. Rittenhouse. Yeah, so this parking area here circled in red and this one here are intended solely to be used by Champagne Motors as storage of their cars, right? The majority of their customers are obviously parking along the main entrance in this vicinity here, this third red circle. So everything back here will be, cars that will be to be sold. The amount of parking required by your zoning regulations for the mixed-use development, the restaurants and the dental office, is solely within the right-hand side of the plan, everything to the right of the pink line. So obviously, we feel that most of the customers and visitors to the site will be parking along the front. There is one single row towards the rear here, which is usually reserved for employees to be out of the way and leaving kind of those prime spots for, as I said, customers and visitors.
Are these vehicles just typical like personal vehicles, or are they commercial, or what type of vehicles will be in these rear lots, if you know?
Yeah, Champagne Motors, and I can just go back to the Google just so you can see. It's a car dealership, right? They're selling standard passenger vehicles, so variety of trucks, sedans. They don't sell, as far as I know, any commercial vehicles in terms of vans or 18-wheelers, anything larger than just passenger vehicles. So it'd be standard. All the spaces that are shown on these are standard. I think that 9.5 by 19 is your regulations in terms of parking lot size. And you can obviously see here as well, zoomed in, that we have double stacked cars as well. So it's not really functional or necessary for the mixed use development. So they will just be cars to be sold.
Thank you.
I have a
Is this-
question.
Wait, I know we got, let's just, Chad, do you have more questions, Chad? Okay,
Questions related to this.
yeah, let's go to Aaron, and then
So-
we'll get to Meg, and then we'll get back to John.
My question had to do with, so you have a retaining wall that starts at that kind of like middle parking lot. So I'm wondering the parking lot to the north. If you have a vegetative buffer plan there, or if you're going to do sort of plantings between that parking lot and the wetlands.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I heard your question correctly. There was a little bit of echo. Are you talking about the vegetation along kind of this area where my mouse is moving right now?
That I might have missed that. What's planned for that area?
Sorry. Here, let me move to the landscape plan, and then you can steer me in a different direction if you think I misunderstood your question. Okay, so let's just get some highlights out here. So retaining wall along the eastern side is in this direction here. On the northern side, change colors, the existing edge of pavement is roughly in red. And if I change over to green, obviously this is the expansion of the parking lot on the northern side. We're showing, again, a limit of disturbance marked as LOD here that I've highlighted in pink. So anything beyond this, kind of in this area where I'm putting those plus marks, is existed forested area. So in this area, we are showing beyond our curb line between the LOD, we are showing a fence, and we are showing grasses and trees along the perimeter of the parking. That obviously continues as we go south and to the east as well. The LOD
Is around all
obviously is
around
here as well. And we do show plantings on the high side of the wall, which we are, and then vegetation obviously on the low side of the wall. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, how wide is that? From the edge of the parking lot to the
How
the pink line that you.
I think she means how
between the
wide is it
retaining
between
wall.
between the wall and your tree line?
Yep. 1 second, I can give you that exact number. Ooh. Approximately 10 feet. Obviously, we wanted to keep it as tight as possible. There's obviously a little bit of disturbance on the downside of the wall just for the constructability of the wall.
Matt, is that a sloped area, that 10 feet, or is it relatively flat?
It's relatively flat. If I just go back to the grading plan, I can show you that specifically.
That's okay. I just wanted to get a sense of if there was a steep slope or not.
Yeah, so just give you in general, right? I showed you before that kind of high spot of 168. We're proposing to continue a high spot. So relatively flat at the base of the wall, which blends in with the topography between the wall and obviously the edge of the wetland.
Thanks. Aaron, did you have more questions
Welcome.
or comments? No. Meg.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on the comment. You can go back to the parking, the labyrinthine parking. Is this more or less or the same amount of parking for the Champagne Motors part than they have now? Because they're demolishing their body shop, right? So they're getting rid of some of their operations. So how does the proposed parking compare to what's present now?
Hold on 1 second, Mary. I gotta get that number for you. If you give me a second, I can answer that. I will say that while I'm figuring out that number, they are reducing the size of the building, but still keeping the amount of services that they do have. So they still are selling cars and doing body work. They're just doing it in a smaller space. But give me a second, I can find out roughly the number of parking spaces before and after.
Well, there's more area than spaces, really.
So existing spaces for Champagne owners, approximately 200 spaces at the moment, Mary. And one second, I'll get you the proposed number. So then on the proposed conditions, we have 75 cars for parking and then 109 for storage. So light reduction overall, I think. Let me see here.
So back to,
Yeah, 16 less spaces. Yeah.
okay, so the connecting drive that sort of pushes the easternmost parking lot out, you know, close to into the upland review area. I'm not sure that I really understand the need for connectivity, because is there some need or desire on the part of the owners of both proposed developments to connect from one to the other? Because is there really a functional need for that? Because it does push that parking lot out quite a bit.
Yep. No, I understand your question. Yep. So, yeah, it is a real functional need, right? So, just kind of picture this, right? Obviously, employees from Champagne Motors, salesmen, mechanics, the owner, right? And then people coming to visit to getting their cars repaired, or they're shopping for a new car. And then next door now they have a new amenity, right? There's restaurants. So I can easily imagine employees and customers coming to Champagne, crossing over to the other side of the parcel to get lunch, get dinner, kind of be patrons of this whole area, as opposed to just coming to one portion of the site. So there is a kind of a practical need for the interconnectivity between the two businesses on the same property.
Well, as Chad pointed out, there isn't even a walkway connecting for just walking over from one building to the other suite of buildings.
Yeah, so there's no interconnecting connection from a pedestrian standpoint on site, but we are showing, as you remember, I said it
on the
towards the
road
beginning.
side.
We
On
are
the road
showing
side.
obviously a frontage sidewalk along the entire thing and connectivity to both front doors as well. Just to point out, just to remind everybody, we are raising the grade on this side to make the driveway connection to the existing traffic signal. So there is a retaining wall here in yellow between the two sites. So the functionality of the pedestrian connectivity between the two sides of the lot will happen along the frontage or through the driveway to the rear.
What's your elevation change at the west end of that retaining wall, Matt? I'm just curious, because I was just thinking earlier, there could be kind of a reasonable alternative where you have a pedestrian and vehicle connection sort of at the west end of that retaining wall that you just highlighted in the front of the buildings, essentially, instead of in the back.
Yep. So retaining wall, right, highlighted here, yellow, right? We're somewhere around 3 feet here. Yeah, it's about a 3 foot wall between the two driveways.
Okay.
So nothing significant, but just making up grade while preserving some of the circulation around both the buildings. Obviously, you can imagine that's a needed desire from the emergency services, police and fire, to be able to circulate around both buildings.
Sure. We are not, we have familiarity reviewing plans, but not designing things like this. But I agree with Meg and John and Chad. I mean, we can see what we see is some additional space to the west of that parking lot, where the parking lot could come closer to the dealership, and then potentially a connection could be made in the front of the buildings for pedestrians and for vehicles. And trying to reconcile that elevation would be a challenge potentially, but it would certainly improve the impact or the potential for impacts in the back.
Right, and just to point out another kind of aspect of this kind of driveway connection, obviously the grade change between the Champagne Motors portion of the site and the mixed use, obviously we're making up that change as well. So you can see we're climbing as well from 166 as we get to around 170. So the length of that driveway is a factor also of climbing the grade between the two sides of the property.
So
But
the
I understand
vision
where you're
here is that staff and customers of Champagne Motors would hop in their cars and drive over to the mixed use site?
They could, that's the option with this driveway connection. But as I said, they also have the pedestrian sidewalk connections, which currently don't exist on site or along the frontage of the property as well.
Right, but you defined that driveway in the back to be a need. A need. Not a want, so a need. What is the feasibility for putting the interconnecting driveway if you feel that it's a need toward the Source Road instead? Thereby letting the parking lot proposed on the easternmost side move closer to the building and away from the wetland.
So placing the driveway, say, I'm just gonna just here, right, as opposed to an interconnection towards the rear, just has more safety concerns, right? We're very close to a busy road with driveway entrances on either side, and obviously a lot more movement with pedestrians on both crosswalks and parking spaces. So the goal is to be able to provide functionality between the two sites, but also a safe way to transverse between both sides of the property. So we feel it was the best location to have it.
Well, I just would say that it's something that I would like to see explored to avoid such proximity to the wetlands. Particularly since you've got a lot of pavement, you know, for the newer development by the roadside. And that's kind of a walk, you know, from the park across a lot of parking lot to reach the 2 restaurants and the dental office.
I think we've made a pretty good, thorough.
Oh yeah, I'm
argument
done.
for ourselves. So I know there's more comments. So John, did you have something else? And then if anybody else, just chime in after John, please.
I have some additional comments. I was just going to also comment that the one in the back, and that's by you can see the double parking area in the back, the double lots, that's primarily for storage. So it seems to me, if you look at the current storage, everything is flat, you know, there's no sort of parking lots, you know, bracketed on top of each other or back behind, sort of in a checkerboard fashion. It's sort of continuous now. So if this is just going to be storage, it seems to me that the kind of argument that we're making here can be realized. But I don't want to beat this anymore. I do have a couple of other questions. One is you did quite a nice job identifying the grass species mixture, but there's no indication of the shrub and tree species lists on this, and there's concern that we are not going to be putting in alien species in specifically or in particular invasive species. And you know, if one just goes to the Connecticut invasive species site, it only lists some of the species that are known to be invasive throughout New England. So I wanted to make sure that you're not going to be putting in alien or invasive shrub and tree species on the site here, when you've done such a nice job sort of outlining what the species of grass and sedge in the mixture is.
Sure, great question, John. Yeah, so our goal is obviously not to introduce any invasive species to the plan, to the property. Obviously, that's not something we're looking to do. We obviously do show on sheet LL0 here the botanical and common names of all the trees and shrubs and grasses here as well, perennials and ground cover. And you know, we'll obviously be certain to double check with the peer reviewers and town staff that they don't believe that we have inadvertently put something here that's invasive, but that is definitely not our goal. And if we find something that is suspect, we would obviously certainly remove it and replace it with something appropriate on the plan.
I'm sorry, I missed that. There was so many different pages here to look through. I missed that one.
No problem, no problem.
I just had a follow-up for that real quick. So there are a couple species that there's a Japanese something or other and a U, and so there are better alternatives than some of the species on here, so I don't know if that's something that we can recommend.
Yeah, I would, Aaron, I would say any species that you recognize that could be a concern, I would identify them now, and we can add them to our minutes.
Well,
Yeah,
Zelkova
we,
is, sorry. Zelkova is,
Oh,
is an
sorry, I'm
alien
just gonna-
species, but I don't believe it's invasive. But again, we should try to focus on mainly native species.
again, yeah, happy, if you guys have any suggestions of trees that you would, or shrubs or anything that you'd like to see here in lieu of what we have on the plan, we're happy to make those swaps as appropriate. I'm not the landscape architect, so probably not the best person to speak to it, but happy to take your suggestions and make some revisions to the plan.
Okay, another question I had was lighting on this. There's, I guess, going to be quite a bit of lighting on this. I wanted to know if you're using dark skies compliant lighting on this.
Yep, great question, John. Yep, so we do have a photometric plan. I didn't get to it as part of the set. Obviously, it's quite large. Yes, we are providing upgraded site lighting for obviously safety and security of the lot. It will be full cutoff, dark sky compliant fixtures that also comply with zoning regulations in terms of light spillage off the property. So yes, that is part of our plan set here. The LED fixtures in terms of poles, and then also mounted to the buildings as well.
And I wanted to know whether you had considered any greenscaping in the site design here. I gather that these are going to be just asphalt paved lots as opposed to maybe semi-permeable. I didn't know whether there were any other greenscaping plans associated with this.
No, I mean, we did do some investigation and conversations with the peer review engineer and peer review wetland scientist on alternative ways to treat the stormwater. And we ended up with the plan we have now with some of their suggestions based on existing site conditions. And a lot of it, there's a lot of space to do some of those larger naturally LID type stormwater features. So that would involve kind of going back into this upland review area. And we obviously wanted to maintain that natural buffer and minimize any disturbance in that area. So we kind of backed away from that to a certain degree to the current plan we have with our stormwater management system.
Could you just quickly, in a nutshell, describe the stormwater management practices at the site?
Absolutely. Yep. So let me just go back to kind of show you what there is now. Let me just go to the survey. So right now, I'll change the color so you can see this. And I'll just try to move slowly around with them. There's a bunch of catch basins within the existing paved area now. So there's one here. There's one in the back lot here, and there's also one in the grassed area here, which goes to the street. So basically, in the existing conditions, there's a couple of catch basins, and everything gets just either in the front here, a small area gets piped to the road, and the majority of the lot, though, either sheet flows into the grass and into the wetlands, or is captured in the catch basins and is discharged to the wetlands. So very, very basic system here. No treatment, no detention, no really stormwater quality features to be heard of. I'll move forward to our proposed plans.
That's all of the existing, Matt? Just that one line?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very, very, very basic. So let me just go into a little bit more detail here on the Champaign side first. So obviously that line coming through here will remain, but we are upgrading it, right? So we are adding offline hydrodynamic separator to that line to provide that kind of water quality treatment that's currently lacking. And then as well, in terms of the expansion of the parking lot and improvements associated with it, we're adding additional catch basins, you know, here, that will, you know, have deep sumps and hoods that will direct the water to offline hydrodynamic separators that will then go into underground detention and infiltration systems. So that's depicted by this box here and this box here. So that obviously helps with the water quality, but also, you know, peak flow mitigation. And then they will be discharged into the same area here as well to maintain those drainage patterns to keep feeding the wetlands.
But those are subsurface infiltration and detention systems. So they are going to infiltrate and retain until they overtop and discharge out to the wetland. Not overtop.
Yeah. So
but,
the system here with the X on it is a detention system, and then this one here with the line is an infiltration system. But yeah, we evaluated it for again the storms that we mentioned 1, 2, 10, 25, and 100 to mitigate the existing conditions versus the proposed conditions to deal with that increase in impervious area, along with the kind of that treatment train in terms of providing that water quality improvement before discharging to the wetlands. So really for the Champaign side, it's a big improvement because as you can see, there's really nothing there now. Things just flow into catch basins and just right out into the wetlands.
Matt, I'm sorry, could you go back and just, where does that green line begin? Does it begin from Stores Road?
Yeah, there's a catch basin in Stores Road. Blue here.
So is that outfall taking everything that the state is collecting on Stores Road also?
There's a little bit coming from Stores Road, not the entire thing. There's also catch basins. Let me see if I can show you here. There's also a catch basins and swales on the other side of Stores Road as well. I'm not sure exactly of how the connectivity to Sawmill Brook is, but there are 1 or 2 catch basins on our side of the road. That one in particular does come to this line that cuts through our property to the wetland.
Okay, so the analysis included that whole drainage area and not just the site drainage.
Right, right. And then interestingly, if I go over to the mixed use side, there was the existing catch basin that I'll just highlight in red here that was in the grass, which goes to the street. So we're actually giving a little bit water back to the road. So in this case, obviously we have again catch basins with deep sumps and hoods throughout the parking lot. Also, you know, some yard drains here as well that go to offline hydrodynamic separators, a subsurface infiltration system with discharges to Stores Road. And then similarly in the back, again, catch basins with deep sumps and hoods, offline hydrodynamic separators, infiltration system as well with interconnectivity to then match the existing outlet area to the wetland to the rear.
So it's all going to that one outfall in the east area.
Correct. Yeah, that's currently where the existing site discharges, and we wanted to maintain that discharge point. As I mentioned before, there is a berm that's kind of off the property here between our property line and the wetland. So water really does flow in this direction.
This is a question for, I'm just curious for Jennifer or our peer review folks or for you, Matt. Are there restrictions or issues with tying into the state system? And we come across developments a lot. You know, we review a lot of these, and we never see the developer sending stormwater into the existing stormwater system that's on the road, which would prevent an outfall, you know, in an adjacent wetland that's 30 feet away or something like that. Are there laws or regulations against interconnecting like that?
Yeah, so we do have to as part of this project because we're making some modification. We're adding a new driveway and obviously proposing to modify the signal there. We do need to submit an encroachment permit to the DOT. As part of an encroachment permit review, they're looking at traffic studies, they're looking at site plans, and they're also looking at drainage. So they are looking at what water we would send to them. So we are allowed to send water to them, but we're only allowed to send water that's kind of almost, to keep it crude, going there already. We can't go, hey, you guys don't want it to go to the wetland. We'd like to send everything to you. That's not going to fly. So we have the stormwater management report and calculations that we provided to the town are also going to the DOT. They're going to verify that what we're sending to them is appropriate, isn't going to be a detriment to their systems, and they'll ask for revisions or more information for them to determine that's an appropriate connection. So there is one now. We're looking to maintain that, obviously, from a hydraulic standpoint to maintain drainage patterns.
All right, thanks. I was just curious about that.
Yeah, and then on obviously the Champaign side, like, I'd love to be able to say, hey guys, why don't you go treat your storm water and not cut through our property and dump it in the wetland, but we'll have to maintain that from them. We can't cut them off from coming through our property. So we're looking to make improvements to that line as well. So at least by the time it gets to the wetland, there is some water quality improvements.
Okay. I have a bunch of quick little questions, but I'm not sure if anybody else has questions right now. No. Matt, do you have a sense of or I guess for either Mr. McManus or Eric, mostly, I guess initially Eric, what was I'm sorry I didn't have a chance to review a lot of this before we were meeting today. And I was just curious what the functions and values assessment resulted in terms of the functions and values for the adjacent wetland.
Yeah, so I think probably the primary function is, I mean, I outlined a few of them in my report, but to me the biggest one that jumps out is flood flow alteration. I mean, this is a very big wetland, not just what's on site, but what's off site. And it does have a significant, water holding capacity and ability to store additional flow during storm events. It's got a lot of size and depressional topography to it. So flood flow alteration was a principal function. And so was sediment, toxicant, pollutant removal, and attenuation, simply because that is in fact what the wetland is doing now. It's receiving a lot of stormwater runoff to the extent that can be alleviated to some degree. That would be good, but that between that pipe outlet and the pond, there is a significant amount of sediment, and it does terminate at the pond. So the pond is functioning almost like a stormwater basin, if you will. It is retaining all of that road sand that's coming into the system, and so you don't see that impact downstream of the pond. So that's another principal function for sure.
All right. Thanks. Mr. McManus, I'm just curious if I'm not sure if you've been to the site, or I'm sure you had a chance to review that report, and anything to add to that, or that's a pretty good assessment.
Yes, good evening. Jim McManus, certified professional soil scientist with JMM Wetland Consulting Services with offices in Newtown. Yes, I have been to the site. I actually visited the site April of this year to review Eric's line and to gather some information on my own to assess what's going on. So yeah, Eric kind of hit it on the head on that one. I'm not sure how many of you folks have been to the site, but if you follow along the wetland boundaries, particularly in the northern portion, and forget about the berm for this minute, there is fill piles. There's a lot of invasives. There's, the wetland boundary line is disturbed. So the functionality of the wetland is further in off site. But yeah, Eric sort of hit that correctly on the major principal functions of the wetland itself. Yeah.
Thank you. And when was the vernal pool? What time of year was that? I mean, I know it's spring, but when exactly were you able to conduct that visit or visits?
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Just let me double check the dates here. It's in the intro of my report. March 14th, April 7th, April 19th, and May 6th were our site visits.
Okay. All right, thanks. Great. That's great. I was curious, Matt, if you have just some quantification, the percent change in impervious cover and the amount of fill that is either on site or more interesting to us, I think, would be the amount of fill that's going into the upland review area.
Increase in impervious, right? And obviously this is not limited to the boundaries of the property, obviously, because we're taking some offsite flow from 50% to 62.5%, about a 12.5% increase in impervious area, hence the inclusion of the detention system. And then roughly around, I think 15,000 cubic yards of fill on the property.
So any sense of that 16,000 cubic yards, what's going to be happening within the upland review area? How much of that is in the upland review area?
Not off the top of my head, but if you want to continue with your questioning, I can see if I can find out that answer.
All right.
In
Thanks
the
for
wetland
working.
application. Somewhere.
It's in the wetland,
Yeah,
it's in the
I don't-
application?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'm sorry, I
Find
didn't,
it for you, but yeah,
it's been a
not-
busy week and I didn't get to review pretty much any of this before tonight. So thank you for looking into that. Well, no, you're busy, so I won't ask you that. Our other peer reviewer, Mr. Trinkhouse, I don't know if there's anything, I know there've been some comments and responses to comments, and I'm just curious if the applicant has addressed everything and if there's anything outstanding.
Sure. For the record, my name is Stephen Trinkus. I'm a licensed PE from Southbury, Connecticut, and I've done the peer reviews here, starting with the original plan, which Matt brought up, where they had the detention ponds, very close to the wetlands. The applicant has addressed many of the concerns we had in the reviews. There's really a few outstanding points. One is they did provide, I asked for the water surface elevations versus the weir height in the diversion manholes. And Matt, could you just pull up your grading plan where they show that your manholes for the separators and just zoom into that
hold on.
area?
Mhm.
Yeah, that one, without the colors, that would be better, actually.
You want this one here?
Yeah, that would be fine. So, when the water is coming from the existing pipe that goes through the site, there's a manhole to divert the water quality flow, which is a rate of runoff based on the water quality volume. And I asked to make sure that the height of the weir within the manhole was set at the water surface elevation for the flow rate that was going to go to the separator. And Matt provided that information. So, the initial 1-inch rainfall event will always go to the separator. Once it gets larger than that, you'll get flow going to the separator, but larger flow will go over the weir and then right into their detention system, which is the design of these practices. They definitely modified the construction sequence for the site. The original one was kind of very generic, and we felt we needed a more specific one. I do believe a phasing plan is still needed because you're demoing part of the building. Then you really need, since you're going to put the new building where the existing parking is, you need to construct the parking in the back for the car dealership, and then you've got your new construction. And having a phasing plan allows the town to have a document that is, reviewable, but also enforceable. And yes, things do modify in the field, but you need to kind of have a plan, so at least you've got something to start with. So I'm fine with having the applicant provide that as a condition of approval. As I think Matt talked about briefly about the reduction in peak rate for the 2-year storm, the DEP manual from 2004 calls out the channel protection volume, and there's 2 standards in there. There's reduction of the post-development peak rate for the 2-year storm being brought back to 50% of the pre-development peak rate for the 2-year storm. So in this case, the 6.4 CFS, which is the pre-development flow, would be brought back to 3.2. The other standard, and this is mirrored in the Mansfield regulations, is to throttle that 6.4 back to the peak rate of the 1-year storm, which Matt has done. The pre-development 1-year flow is to the east is 5.04 CFS, and he's got 5 CFS going out that way. So it's kind of an either or standard. He has met it. I do believe, I think this more restrictive standard should be met for the following reason. While the applicant did do test holes at our request in all of these detention areas, they have not conducted infiltration tests, and they have made an assumption of a very small infiltration rate in the hydraulic modeling, which I don't have an objection to, but we really haven't proven that the infiltration practices will actually infiltrate the water. And runoff volume, especially from large directly connected impervious areas, will cause, adverse stream channel impacts because of the increased flow rate, volume, and duration of flow that goes out into the stream system. But he has met one of the 2 standards as permitted by the Mansfield's regulations. I just think it should be a little different, but I'll leave it at that. Matt, if I can, instead of you sharing your screen, if I can share mine, I'd like to just bring up my last report from November 14th. Okay, I don't know if everybody, has everybody seen this or not?
We can see it.
Oh, you can see the Word document? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so one of the suggestions we had made to Matt and his team at one of the Zoom meetings with staff was, originally there were 2 discharge points. There was one here from the underground detention system from the new parking lot. And then there was also one behind the commercial building that went out into the upland area. It discharged right at the wall. The drainage system here is all really conventional practices. It's catch basins with deep sumps and hooded outlets, as Matt said, offline separators, and then, underground detention. They don't do great jobs for nutrient removal. In this November 14th letter, I did the pollutant loading analysis, with the car dealership being considered an industrial site, which it is by the DEP manual, and then the commercial site as commercial. And basically, you'll get about 70% removal of TSS and hydrocarbons, from both sites, but the nutrient removals are very low. They're, anywhere between 7 and 15 or maybe 25%. So it's my suggestion as a modification to, from the detention system under the back parking lot, to realign the outlet pipe on an angle to kind of direct it towards the wetland area. Eliminate this piping system under the parking lot, discharge from the commercial site to this point here, and then where this red line is to do a wet swale. We provided the applicant with the specs for it. It was be 4-foot bottom, a 1-foot depth, 3-to-1 side slopes. It fits between the wall and the limit of disturbance. So there'd be no increase in the limit of disturbance. To do this, it would, you dig out the sandier material that would be here and put in basically a, very wet or highly organic soil, put wetland plugs in it, and you'd basically have a very flat, wet swale here. And what that would do is provide nutrient removal because of the uptake via the plants of nitrogen and phosphorus that you're going to see in the stormwater. And it would add an additional level of improvement to the water quality that ultimately goes to the wetlands. I mean, the current plan by BL is definitely an improvement over what's there today, where there's absolutely no treatment or detention. But I think since the swale would fit in this area without increasing the limit of disturbance and would be, very flat, probably 1% or less, the flatter the better, because the water would actually tend to sit in it. And with a wetland plant community, you basically are creating a wetland environment here. The denser the vegetation is, the happier the swale is. And it also becomes, actually more of a functional wetlands. Some of the studies North Carolina State did along interstates down there, the wetter the swale was, the more silt that accumulated in it, the better the water quality improvement got. So this would be my recommendation as far as that goes. And otherwise, the applicant has, addressed, the concerns that we had, going forward. And, I'm comfortable with the couple modifications that I, just went over.
Thank you. I did notice just in the few minutes I had before the meeting that there was there were some exploratory borings or something like that where modeling was seen at a few feet below. And I think either the design decision or the recommendation was to bring in clean permeable material to kind of encourage infiltration in the practices. And I'm just, it's new to me. I know modeling is a sign of sort of prolonged saturation in soils, and I'm just, is that that's a workable solution, that clean fill can be brought in even if it's likely to be saturated again by the high water table, and that the infiltration systems can be successfully constructed to kind of still operate even if there's frequent high water table?
Well, the two infiltration systems on the commercial building have, at least a 3-foot separation of the modeling in those areas. So
Okay.
I'm more comfortable with those two. This one under the parking lot here, this is where the modeling was quite shallow. And this is why I think, BL has raised this up, to put this system in the fill. The concern I really have is you're putting a parking lot here, so you need to have structural fill. It's got to be compacted for structural loading. That's contrary to having infiltration of the fill material, but the infiltration isn't going to really occur in the fill. It's going to occur in the native soil. And with modeling being, I believe, less than 2 feet in this area, I don't think it's really going to occur. That's why I asked BL to provide the, reduction via the channel protection volume, because I don't believe we're going to get good infiltration out here. I
And
did
since-
include
yeah.
the infiltration practices in the pollutant loading analysis, just to look at the best case scenario. But I think putting a parking lot over this and having material that infiltrates is a little bit of a contradiction, because you've got to have it 95% proctor density to support the vehicle movement. And it's a fairly high fill here. Yeah, it's a 5 to 6 foot fill. So, it's going to be substantial. One of the reasons we wanted the test pits was when I initially walked the site, you could see, I think there were monitoring wells in this back flat area. And you could see it was fairly sandy soil, but on the flip side, I think it had been cut and filled. And when they did the testing, I think Matt found modeling in a couple spots very shallow. I think under the underground pipe system, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, I think you were 12 inches to modeling in that area. So
Yeah.
that's why this was a solid pipe system, because, there was no way to infiltrate in that area. There are some other, alternatives, I think, to follow up on John's question. I think some of the other commission members of, what else could you do besides pavement out here? If this is, and again, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, if this is truly just vehicle storage, for cars, and it's not customers, in and out here,
New vehicles.
it would, I think there's a couple options, that I'll throw out there with my expertise in lit. One would be using the PVC paver grids that come in 3-foot sections with topsoil and grass on top of a layer of bank run sand and gravel, and then with an under drain system that would then bring the water, to the detention system, because it's a high pollutant load site, so we can't infiltrate it without treatment. But that would, if you're just parking cars out here, it would give you a green structural support, but it wouldn't be pavement. That would be one consideration for this lot. I think the other lot to the north, as it's pretty much contiguous to the existing, I think that one makes sense to be paved, but you could consider doing that back here. And I could, provide Matt with, more of a design spec if they want to consider it. But that would be one way to reduce pavement. But with the modifications to the stormwater management system that they've already done, and I think with the addition of the swale, I'm also okay with it being paved. I know it is in the upland review area, but I think, with what they've done and with the addition of the swale, I'm okay with the, addressing the water quality from it.
So the swale had, the swale has been incorporated or is still being considered?
No, the last Zoom meeting we had, you know, BL, you know, didn't want to put it on the plan. You know, I'm recommending it, and it's, I guess, up to you guys whether to require it. But what you'll see in the pollutant loading that I, you know, did for this for each of the treatment systems, you'll see the nitrogen and phosphorus removals are very low. And that's because structural practices don't do anything for them, but the wet swale will.
So I think there are,
Thank
from in my reading and working with the applicant and the peer reviewers, there's just a kind of a difference of opinions. And I think it would be helpful for this commission to hear from both Jim and Eric as the wetland scientists, just to sort of, because I think there's probably, from my understanding is that there's probably arguments to be made for both situations, but maybe the commission could just hear from both Jim and Eric, and maybe Eric, you could go first as on behalf of the applicant, and then Jim could kind of counter if we could do it that way. Erica.
Yeah, you're asking about the question of whether to incorporate the, to add the swale to the back of the
Correct.
project. Yeah. And I've had this discussion with BL as well. It's an interesting idea because, of course, when you come in with an application, the goal is to always provide, you know, as large of undisturbed wetland buffer as you can and limit upland review area activity. I thought what Steve had drafted, which I read the other day about the pollutant removal that you might get out of the swale, was very interesting. One of the things that confuses me, and I would love to get an answer on, is there seems to be a significant difference between what BL suggests the infiltration system removal of nitrogen and phosphorus would be over what Steve suggests. So I would love to, and I feel that's always frustrating for me when I work on different projects, that I feel like I get different answers from engineers on the effectiveness of removal. So I would love to, I think Steve said something like 30%, and Matt's crew is saying they think it'll be closer to 90%. So it can't be both of those. So it's maybe somewhere in the middle. So I'd love to get that resolved. But my thought is, if there is significant additional removal of nitrogen and phosphorus with Steve's additional system, it's worth that additional encroachment into the upland review area, because that section of upland review area where Steve had cited it is already pretty disturbed anyway, and it's mostly invasives at the transition of the old parking lot. So it doesn't represent any significant habitat. So if it really does provide that additional removal, I like the idea. But I also, one of the questions I had for Steve, and I don't think I asked Matt this, but was with this type of land use, do you think nitrogen and phosphorus rates are going to be all that high? I usually associated that more greenscaping, lawns, you know, residential as opposed to commercial. So that was one of the questions I had. I don't know if I just asked, I maybe asked more questions than I answered there.
Well, I'll let Jim go on the swale, and then I'll address your questions, Eric. I'd be happy to.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks.
Yep. Jim McManus again, for the record. To me, it's a personal preference. I like above ground detention or ground water quality treatment stuff, facilities, where swales, bioretention basins, whatever, than the infiltration. There's a couple of reasons. I think Mother Nature, that's how she does it. You know, she uses the sun and everything else and the plants. I always think the plants, and be able to, I mean, let's face it, wetlands are sinks. They're delivering the kidneys of the earth. They're filters. If we filter our pollutants through a wetland, it's going to do a better job potentially than the underground facilities will. I'm not opposed of underground. Sometimes, I mean, they both work well. I just myself like above ground if we can use it. I mean, like Eric said, yeah, I didn't look at the details of what Steve proposed, but a vegetated swale does do a nice job of removing other things, like some of the nutrients and things like that, because the plants utilize them. But also, Eric mentioned, you know, as I mentioned as well, that wetland upland review area adjacent to the wetland line is disturbed with many invasives. The habitat is sort of limited. That's where a lot of the fill piles and other miscellaneous soil disturbances were noted. So I think if we can improve the water quality by putting in a swale, I think it's a win for the project for sure. I'm not opposed to it. I thought it was a good idea myself.
All right, let me go back and kind of just discuss the actual Eric's questions. Yeah, Eric, the loads are relatively small. What I did was calculate them for, the water quality storm, 1 inch of rain. And, and they are small. I mean, they're, 0.04 pounds, 0.4 pounds. They're small. A lot of it is coming by atmospheric deposition onto the impervious surface and then get washed off. But they're not large amounts as far as that goes. The removal efficiencies that are published in many different places are for standalone systems. So when you have one system, you can use that value. Where they don't hold up is when you put practices in series. As you start cleaning the water, like the first thing here is the catch basins with deep sump. They remove 9% of total suspended solids and about 14% of zinc. They don't do anything for phosphorus, nitrogen, or actually I should say hydrocarbons are 14%. There's nothing for zinc, nitrogen, or phosphorus. So you take the load of, for any of those pollutants and you apply the 9% or the 14%. So then you have less of a load seeing the separator. And there's been research in the LID world at conferences that were before COVID when we had them in person. And I know this year they're going back to in person. But there's a lot of academic research going on as to, how much to reduce the published data when you have stuff in series. And the last talk I had heard, I think this was at the 15 LID conference in Nashville, was reducing the second system to 75% of the published value, a third system in series, 35% of the published value, because as the water gets cleaner, it gets harder to remove more of the pollutant load. These are all standalone numbers, so that's why they're significantly different than what Matt came up. And I expect hopefully at this year's LID conference, we're going to see perhaps a better, range of values for this. But this is being played with by several of the universities. I know Villanova is one of their grad students had done a presentation on this. So, the entire load is not seen by every practice. So, and as you clean the water, it gets harder to reduce it, the pollutant loads as you go down the line. It's easy to get rid of coarse sediment, but the suspended sediment is really hard because it's very fine and it's in the suspension of the liquid. So that's why, these values were reduced. But with the wet swale, we'll definitely get the nutrient removals up much higher. And I think, as Jim pointed out, right now it's not a great upland area. It will fit right within the limit of disturbance that's already on the plan. So there's no increase in it. The actual fill limit before the retaining wall was added was about another 9 or 10 feet out from the limit of disturbance shown on the current plan. So, the retaining wall has reduced that, and this swale would fit, right within, that area. And the other value of opening up that area, and I think that's why BL proposed seeding in there, is once you get, you clear trees out and you expose the ground and the fringe area of the forest, to sunlight, you tend to get a lot more herbaceous vegetation growing up, which is likely to occur, on the east side of the swale in the upland area. But the wetland plants will do very well, with the wetland soil here, and also, again, improve the nutrients. It's really my experience and opinion that when we redevelop sites, that we really need to, make them as good as we can get them. You're not going to, reduce the loads by 90%, but, if you can make a big improvement over what was there, that's what we should strive for.
Mr. Trinkus, I appreciate that explanation, and also just speaking a little bit to the idea that, well, I often think there's so much that we we really hang our hat on modeling, and it's, I don't know much about the modeling that are used, but I understand a little bit maybe that there are different models, and different models have different outputs, and we rely a lot on these outputs. So it's just helpful to have that context, and for me understand that there are limits with all of these tools that we rely on.
And there's also, a document, and I can send Jennifer the link tomorrow or later, to what's called the ASCE BMP database. This is a compilation of monitoring data from across the US and I think elsewhere, for all types of stormwater practices. And they only they're looking at the concentration, but you can, by taking the influent versus the effluent, you can figure a percent removal from them. But it's continually updated, and it's a great source of the data, for this. And again, water quality has not really been addressed, well by most municipalities. I think we are finally beginning to see it be done, because we're seeing the adverse impacts of, discharges. And again, LID it's not a fixed science. As more research gets done, designs change. The original bioretention media, which had about 30 or 40% topsoil, now we want, maybe 2% topsoil in it because the clay content got too high and it caused clogging. So, the research institutions, which, are primarily Villanova, North Carolina State, with Bill Hunt, obviously the UNH Stormwater Center up in Durham, Washington State, they play around with different practices and systems, and they actually try to break them in a way and see what works and doesn't work to give the designers the best tools forward to create better designs. So we're getting there slowly, but it is a work in progress.
I don't want to digress on this too much, but at my job, which is an engineering company, we saw a presentation from a UVM faculty who demonstrated that adding compost to surface practices was actually putting more nutrients into the water leaving the rain gardens and the surface practices. And so there was a recommendation to drastically across the board, across all BMPs, to drastically reduce the amount of compost going in. So it's a learning process in many ways.
Yeah, that's actually very true for under drain systems. But if you're not having an under drain, then the compost does not cause that impact.
Right. Yeah, they were under drained. Yeah.
So yeah, under drain does. They use koi to mix with the sand to provide the organic content. So yeah, there's a lot of things, but it's the under drain systems that can wind up discharging for the first few years more nutrients than they're removing. That's absolutely true.
So I guess there's going to be discretion in your recommendation to the Inland Wetlands Agency, and then ultimately the Inland Wetlands Agency will off.
Yeah.
They'll make the decision. But
yeah, Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Jennifer. I'll
No,
wait till you finish and then just share if I have a minute. Yeah.
I'm good.
Okay. Sorry. So, Mr. Chairman, obviously, we, as peer reviewers mentioned, we did have conversations about adding that wet swale as part of a discharge from the infiltration system to the ultimate discharge point in the wetlands. Our only concern, obviously, is that there was a little bit of a professional disagreement over the removal efficiencies of the infiltration systems that we do have. So, and then the small amount of nutrients that are expected here. One of our concerns is just that, that wet swale at the base of that retaining wall, 4 foot wide, 3 to 1 up, would be about 10 feet wide. So the practicality of constructing that and potentially having a maintenance road or maintenance access to that wet swale at the base of the retaining wall would actually increase the limit of disturbance beyond what's on the current plan. And our only goal is to always pull back from the original plan that we had that was basically clearing to the property line. I know it's upland review area, there's a wetland, and there's also obviously residents to that eastern side. So there's also a practicality to the natural buffer there in terms of sight lines and noise mitigation. So our goal was to always pull it back. we think that our system is adequate enough for those nutrient removals to suffice the town regulations and current standards. But if you're recommending us follow peer reviewer with the addition of that, we're obviously we will follow along.
You,
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just address Matt's comment. First, Matt, you can maybe adjust the width or the side slopes, because all you got to do is convey the 10-year event from the commercial side, which is probably a very small amount of water. So if you could make it 6-7 inches deep and a 2-to-1 side slope, it will fit there. Wet swales actually require no maintenance. The denser the vegetation, the more accumulation of silt in it, the better the pollutant removal. And all you got to do is, walk through it the first couple of years to get rid of invasive plants, but you don't need machine access for it. So I think if you size it, to convey that 10-year flow, you'll be able to shrink it down. If you can keep a 4-foot width and a shallow depth, that's even better for water quality. But the side slopes can be adjusted to fit within the limit of disturbance. So I leave that up, to your sizing, but I think it'll fit there without any problem.
Matt, this is just going back to a question I asked before about possibly the amount of fill in the upland review area.
Yep.
Were you able
I got
to?
that for you. Yep.
Yeah.
3,740 cubic yards of fill in the upland review area.
Thanks a lot. I know that's in the report. Thanks for finding it.
Yep, no problem.
I don't have anything further for applicants or our peer reviewers. I don't know if other commissioners have anything, or we're ready to start working on the motion itself, or our comments that we want to sort of craft into a motion. Does anybody have anything further for our presenters? Okay.
Thank you for your time and consideration. I really appreciate it, and
Yeah,
I
no,
love the discussion. So.
Yeah, I appreciate the sort of color walkthrough that you do. That's really effective. It can be tricky with site plans to kind of be able to, mentally walk through all those different lines. So I really appreciate that. Thank you for the peer reviewers for being here.
But I do like the coloring. I think it does allow me to do something that I couldn't do in person without a lot of markers from my daughter's collection.
And you're all welcome to stay, but I want to say thank you to the peer reviewers for being here. It's really helpful to have you at the meeting for any questions that come up in the moment. So
You're welcome.
Chad, I don't know if you want to put it up or give us a sense of how you feel about a motion so far, or does anybody, I guess the first thing we should say is, would somebody like to make a motion to get Chad started?
So
or if you've already got one.
I'm working on one. I need a few questions answered just for clarification. So some of the things that we've requested of other projects, other applicants include baseline measures of water quality to assess changes in wetland functions and values, which hopefully would be improved. I didn't catch within the report if any baseline measures of water quality were conducted up to this point or are intended before construction.
That's a good question. I mean, we've reviewed a lot of subdivision. No, those subdivisions. Those are just sort of high density development, and we did ask for that monitoring.
Maybe I think Matt's still on there. Matt, could you remind us if you've done any baseline water quality testing?
Hey, I just stepped away from my computer. We didn't do any monitoring of the current discharge to the wetland to have a baseline, but obviously it's something we can perform. Turbidity monitoring, that sort of thing, at the discharge if that's something the commission feels is necessary.
Having seen this wetland myself during a site visit, I think it's going to be pretty easy to demonstrate improvements in function and values, but we need a starting point. And so without that starting point, it's just basically us saying that it's an improvement. So I've added that, or I should say retained that then.
Although, let me just sort of, I think that all of the other sites where we've done this, there's actually been water running through the proposed development, and that isn't the case here. I mean, either a permanent or semi-permanent stream or some other water body that has been traversing either the property itself or right adjacent to the property. So that was, I think,
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. For this, are we talking about water quality monitoring of the stormwater going into the wetland, Chad, or the moisture in the wetland? That's true. We don't have a stream per se to.
So John raises a good point because
it
the
would be off
delineated
property,
wetland
yeah.
boundary is on property, but the wetland itself is off property.
Yes, I think
Sure, yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up, but I'm not. That might be a
Yeah.
more challenging thing to implement here.
So what I was considering, I guess I made some assumptions, is obviously stormwater discharge, specifically because that of the discharge point at the wetland on our property, very clear delineated discharge point that we can do a pre-construction, post-construction. Obviously, with it not flowing, it would have to be, right at or during a storm event to actually capture flow, because when it's not raining, there's nothing coming out of those pipes coming off the site.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm in favor of that. Thank you, Matt.
I think that was the only open question I had, so I'm happy to share my screen and share with you all what I have drafted so far. So this would then be a motion coming from me, I guess. Give me a second here.
And then while you're doing that, Chad, for Matt, you talked about the increases in impervious surface from like 50 or so to 61%. Do you have that number, an increase in acreage? An actual aerial increase?
I don't off the top of my head, but if you give me a few minutes, I can get you an actual square footage or acreage.
I guess I did have one more question. I think you all are looking at my motion, which apparently John will second. Let me remove that.
You know the future? Wow.
Mr. Chairman, it's about 38,000 square feet of additional impervious area in terms of square footage.
Thank you. Okay, so
I can get you acreage. Hold on, give me a second. I can convert.
yeah, that's what, maybe 0.8, something like that.
Oh. 0.87. Yeah.
I'm happy to second that motion.
Let me make sure it's all visible on the screen. And I'm not seeing the future here. That's
Copy and paste, Chad. Copy and paste.
there's a reason I'm able to pull some of this together as quickly as I do. It's because I start from some previous text to help me out. So I did have one last open question, which was about the monitoring wells. Those were mentioned. And I did see a few of them while I was out there. I think there's at least 2 on the property. What's the current status of those wells, and what's their proposed status after construction? Will they be maintained or continue to be monitored?
A great question, Mr. Renaus. Yeah, so those monitoring wells were installed as part of the environmental assessment of the property, the phase 1 environmental. Some of those results from that report suggested some areas to clean up. Majority of it is inside the building, obviously related to the car dealership. There are some areas that continue to be monitored and moved to a phase 2 as part of the environmental scientists' recommendation. So I don't know a solid answer at this point, but if they need to be maintained, we will obviously cut them to proposed grade to maintain them. If they can be removed, they will be removed.
Matt, is the redevelopment driven at all by sort of outdated or deteriorating systems in the building that are not properly or may not be properly dealing with hydrocarbons or, things that could leak out of a commercial facility like that?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is it's not the current operation of how things are done functionally within the building, but more of historical uses and prior to standards and practices of the car industry. So
Yeah. Okay.
just kind of historical cleanup as opposed to an ongoing issue.
Gotcha. Thanks.
A couple of points on here. I believe point number one, that's cubic yards, not cubic feet.
Thanks.
That's true. Yeah.
And number 2 or 3, I think that the one alternative suggestion that was raised by Mr. Trinkhouse was to consider using some non-impervious surfacing. He had made a suggestion. I notice that currently about a third of the cars are stored on grass, either in the front or behind. If you look at the the aerial photo satellite images, it shows plenty of cars being parked, not on, and apparently in storage, not on pervious surfaces. So that calls into the question the need of sort of a particularly that area at the back of the bump out area, parking area, which is clearly just for storage, because you see double lines where 2 cars are parked on top of each other.
So John, the highlighted text is what I captured from that part of the conversation. Does this work as an alternative?
Yeah.
I believe that's the that's the easternmost lot, not the southernmost?
Yes, it's the eastern. It's the back, the rear, which is the eastern edge.
I believe one of our peer review gentlemen mentioned something about encouraging actual infiltration tests to be conducted. I don't know if we have that as one of our bullets. Were there, not sure who was speaking to that, but are there specific locations that we need to sort of express here, or?
Mr. Chairman, it would be in the areas of the proposed subsurface infiltration systems.
In that easternmost lot, or yeah, where that's in the easternmost lot?
All of them.
In all of them?
Yeah.
In
The
all areas?
commercial side
Yeah.
and the car side. Yep.
Okay, so Chad, if you could pluralize area to areas, or somehow express that there's more than one spot, thanks.
This is divergent to the other points listed, but I think John might have said something about having native species used in the landscaping. I didn't know if that was a point we wanted to include.
Well, I was going to suggest adding that.
Yeah.
Discouraging the use of hybrids and varieties, and
Can you say that again?
discouraging the use of hybrids and varieties, and encouraging the use of natives. So I don't know if you want specific species, we don't want to see. I don't know that we need to get that specific in this bullet, but there are like the Japanese Zelkova, and there's a plane tree. There's better alternatives to those. So I don't know if you want to just mention that.
I think that's good. That's comprehensive. Chad, could you bring us down to the lowest point, or the lowest bullet, and anything that might be based? Baseline measurements, you mean sort of sampling and analysis of stormwater samples? You do, okay. Just want to make sure we're on the same page. And then the one thing maybe the swale that we discussed at the end there, I don't know what folks think about that, and how we want to recommend to IWA, or just if we have any input for IWA on the swale that was discussed next to that easternmost parking lot. You know,
I think that was a great idea from my perspective anyways.
okay. So yeah, I guess
one comment I have is to Matt's point about, keeping that buffer. So I thought when Steve had mentioned that it could be narrower, I think that's a good idea, because you do want to have the treatment of the runoff, the infiltration, but you want to maintain that as much of a buffer for the neighboring properties to reduce noise and all of that, because they are so, but that's just one suggestion I have.
I'll just say too, we can look to minimize. Oh,
go ahead,
sorry,
Matt.
Sean.
That's all right, go ahead.
Okay, we can look to, we can certainly look to minimize the width. Unfortunately, a bulldozer is a bulldozer, right? So we'll be honestly almost limited to disturbance based on the width of the machinery that we can use to create the swale, but we can certainly try to minimize it as much as possible in terms of the sizing of it.
Oh, you do have the wet swale here. Sorry, I didn't see it, Chad, earlier. Okay.
So, Matt, how much is that going to expand the limit of disturbance by adding that and keeping it as narrow as possible? That was a question I have.
I think
Jennifer, it'll depend based on how we size it, and I have a fear that it'll be a little bit of an increase over to what we show right now, which is 10 feet. Obviously, we would try to keep it within that 10 feet, but didn't want to make any promises.
I think that was Mr. Trinkus's point, was that the existing footprint was acceptable and not to increase not to push any further into, outside of the existing LOD. And I would say this could sort of bolster the argument that that parking lot could be moved, more westward towards Stores Road, or slightly modified to create more space for that swale. Just obviously everything on site is integrated, but I think Mr. Trinkus's original point was that the existing footprint was enough to do the treatment for just that commercial side.
That was my understanding as well, although I don't see it captured in the notes that I took during the meeting.
Yes, what do you have here? To add a swale along the retaining wall approved? Within the existing footprint of the, grassed, landscaped area. I don't know, something, not to suggest that we're asking for additional, an expansion of the limit of work.
I think it was referred to as limit of disturbance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have to kind of leave it to the developers
Yeah.
in terms of judging the functionality of this. If it's a couple
Yeah.
of feet wider, I don't want to compromise the functionality of this or the practicality of building this.
Yeah,
I
it's
think we're
gotta-
all splitting hairs otherwise.
So John, are you advocating to take this part out then?
You're muted, John.
Yeah, I know. I mean, this is sort of a minor point from my perspective, but
Ideally, I could add ideally.
Well, let's say if it fits within the limit of existing disturbance and it's bigger than that area, then again, that goes back to maybe this parking lot could be moved farther westward to create the appropriate space for an important, green infrastructure practice on the site. That's where we get into these situations where we're stuck with being okay with the amount of impervious surface that we have. And I think we should rethink it and think what we really need is a practice that adequately treats stormwater. And if that means we have a smaller parking lot, or we need to push that access connector between the two properties into a slightly different configuration. The goal should be to have an adequately sized and functioning practice and have the pavement, fit, or maybe relocate, again, explore relocating that connection to the front, maybe justifying why that connection can't move to the front. What are the reasonable restrictions that don't allow that connection to be happening at the front of the site?
I agree with that, and in fact, it makes much more sense to do that. And that would, certainly could be put in as another point here, because that whole contorted back end of connecting these things just, created a lot of extra paved surfaces, and in fact, that rear part is all going to be storage of cars.
Somewhere in the plan, there was a traffic analysis for long vehicles, and I couldn't find the page number. But my recollection is that analysis, there basically wasn't a way for a large vehicle to use that connector without driving over islands or going off of the road, basically. So my understanding of that was there's not a way for say an emergency vehicle or a tractor trailer to go in through one entrance, around the back of the buildings using that connector, and come out through the second entrance of the lot. And so I think it's only to facilitate storing cars in that back lot. I don't think it's actually to connect the two properties. Let me see if I can search within the document.
I wonder if we consider kind of revising the bullet on this to focus one section of the bullet on moving the parking lot westward, and a second bullet or a second part of that about, being very specific about moving it westward in order to, move it away from the wetland. Well, I don't know. We're not planners, so maybe that's going too far. Maybe I'm taking that back. I don't know.
No, it's not, because it helps lessen impact to the wetlands in the upland review area.
Yeah, so I mean, to consider alternative site designs that would relocate that connection between the commercial and industrial uses and allow that parking lot to move westward. And that redesign would also may also allow for the swale to be more appropriately sited.
Well, to Chad's point before, though, he seems to be suggesting that in the document, he thought there was a reference to the connector not really to be facilitating, commerce between the two people, going between the car dealership and the dentist's office, restaurants, but perhaps to get cars back to the building, to the back of the building.
Yeah, I mean, this is where we just have to be careful of our scope, which is to protect water, wetlands and water courses.
But that's what this is about, because it's about removing impervious pavement, the less impervious pavement you have.
Right. So I think that we can advocate for that, but it's hard. I don't know, for myself, it's hard for me to advocate for turning radiuses and things like that I know nothing about. But
no, but I think Chad's talking about functionality, and need for impervious surface, which then has more impact.
Yeah, I mean, I recognize the applicant's choice of we need a connection between these two uses, and they don't need to justify that use. We just need to. Our comments are like, well, can that connection be better designed in order to move us farther from
Exactly.
from that wetland area. And just maybe that removes some fill out of the upland review area too. I mean, I recognize the wetland is not great, but we did hear earlier that one of the areas had modeling in the soil at 12 inches. And my sense is that that area is essentially a filled wetland was filled, probably decades ago. So 12 inches to modeling is not much. That's practically qualifying as a wetland, or it's a filled wetland probably. So anything that can be done to try to move back onto, things that are going to help the stormwater infiltration system actually, do what it's intended to do and provide more buffer at the same time. Once again, Chad, well done. I don't have any further comments. I really appreciate you chasing the conversation and capturing all this. So does anybody else have anything? No? Would somebody like to second this? I'll second it. Any more comments or discussion about the motion as it's written? Does anybody want to read top to bottom again? You good? Okay. I am voting in favor. Is anybody not voting? Is anybody voting in opposition? Please speak up. No. Is anybody abstaining? No. So I'm guessing, not guessing, I'm saying that this is a unanimous vote. Is that correct? No disagreement there. All right. So
Should have just left the text there, huh?
we
Sorry about
usually
that.
pass things unanimously.
Yeah, it's just not good form, especially with applicants present. I know for a fact as a consultant previously that there's a lot of copy paste, and keyword
Oh, yeah.
searches are very helpful in removing or replacing client names.
Sure, we get plans sometimes with other projects on them, because they're moving fast.
Well, so at this point, for our applicants playing the role of Jen here, you're welcome to hang on for the rest of our meeting, but the business for you is concluded.
Great. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate your time tonight. And thanks, Jennifer, for getting us to this point. Have a great night, everybody.
You too.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for all the information and your time.
No problem. Good night.
All right, I'm
Good
gonna
night.
stop sharing my screen so I can finish cleaning up notes.
Okay. Jen, it was really, I know it's not always easy to do, but having our peer review folks here, that was nice. I know it ended up being kind of a long discussion, but that is really helpful to have them here.
Well, the reason why I especially wanted them for this discussion is there were these points of discretion, right? That I felt that they needed to kind of talk about. And so, but generally we try to, I try to have things wrapped up before they get to you or the Inland Wetlands Agency. But in this case, there were just a few little items that needed to be sort of discussed.
Yeah, they're pretty minor. But no, I feel like,
yeah.
but the town has been great about finding, I don't know, I really enjoyed what Land Tech's been able to do for us. And then, Mr. Trinkus and Mr. McManus as well. So that was great. Let me find the agenda here and just get us to our next item. Our meeting schedule, which is item 5B. Does anybody have any concerns?
Is that your meeting schedule?
It's
Did that come up as your, oh, here we go. I'm sorry here. So for January, because of the way, we have a lot of applications, where the Wetlands has a number of receipts, on the 21st. So I have put your meeting on January 11th as opposed to, the third Wednesday, because the public hearing for a few of them is supposed to open on, I'm looking at my board here, on January 17th. So,
Okay.
yeah. For,
Does that work for everybody?
Mhm.
Or for a quorum at least?
Yeah,
So I'll be traveling, and I don't yet know my schedule, but I may be absent for that meeting on the 11th.
No.
no,
I'm sorry.
no.
You've gone too
No.
far now, Chad. You can't go back.
I'll,
Oh, John, you went back onto mute.
We lost you.
all right, I'll be in New Zealand then.
Okay.
Throw your Rotten Tomatoes at John, not me, folks. I'm only
We'll
going
have
to
to
Rhode
make-
Island.
Yeah, we'll have to make sure that I just wanted to make sure you had, it's a tight schedule and I've got application after application, so
Hmm.
I'm trying to balance everything, so if we could keep it to the 11th, it would be great. You will be down too, so we have to make sure that folks commit to
Yeah.
come so we can get a quorum.
Yeah. So yeah, if anybody can't make that meeting, just let Jennifer know, please.
I have to look into something. I think there's a middle school concert that night. But I'll double check
Really?
that. Yeah.
Okay. If
Well,
not,
it just says Lucy concert. I don't know it yet. I'll follow it up.
Okay. If that's true, I might also have a conflict. So
oh no.
yeah.
Oh.
Do we have much for our December meeting? Do you know yet, Jen?
You do not.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any reports from members? Item 6.
Before we move on, previously we have made a motion and adopted the schedule. And so I'm wondering if we should do that as well here.
Thank you, Chad. Can somebody make a motion to adopt as written?
I'll move.
Thanks, Chad. Have a second.
I'll second.
Anybody opposed or abstaining? Okay, we will pass that unanimously with Chad and Miranda seconding.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for getting me back to that. Any reports from members? My company is launching like a nature-based solutions little focus group. So that is super exciting on a personal level. So I feel like we might have some real direction on those types of projects.
That's great.
So, yeah. Communications. Just a couple agent approvals, Jennifer.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's it. Our next meeting will be December 21st. Wow.
Yes, that's correct. That's what it's scheduled for.
Yeah, if you have business, otherwise
Sure.
I probably will go ahead and cancel that.
Okay.
So, and just so everyone really prefers the in-person meeting, right? Is that what folks are saying? Can
No.
raise a
I mean,
hand?
I do.
you do?
I'm ambivalent.
You're ambivalent? Okay. That's good
Well,
to
for
know. That's
winter-
important.
For
to say.
winter, I'm ambivalent. Yeah,
Other,
just 'cause
everyone
of health
else,
concerns, yeah.
you know, the one thing about the virtual meeting is like tonight, to manage an applicant, it is so much easier. I
Yeah.
feel like you can see the work that they're doing so much more clearly, and they can, you know, but we'll just go with what the commission.
When it's hybrid, does that give the applicant the opportunity to do it remotely?
They do, but it's,
Yeah.
you know, like, for example, last time, I didn't record that, but it was okay because everyone was in person. But like, so there's a lot of room for error there. And I don't, we don't, for example, the town council is going hybrid. they have 3 staff members doing that.
Wow.
Wow.
So it's just an added layer. So, but
I-
you know,
yeah,
we'll probably do the best we can. I will see about maybe making it so that they have to come in person unless they call us and they say that they need to be accommodated. But to come to do it hybrid, it seems like it would be easy. It's just a lot of moving parts.
So for the logistics of it, it makes a lot of sense to keep doing it remotely. I think I mean, personally, as a volunteer who enjoys volunteering with an interesting group of people, you know, I'm compelled to also want to get in person and sort of continue to do that again. So not that I'm ambivalent, but I have a hard time answering that question because I feel like, you know, it works well both ways.
How about we do, well, and this is something you can decide with my, what is he or she, my successor or whatever, that how that will work. And, you know, maybe it's like sometime every other month you're in person versus, or if you have a big meeting with an applicant, you know, that you think public will come to, something like that. So
Yeah, like, do we think it's easier to be remote when we have a lot of applicants, like a busy meeting, like the January meeting might be? Or, I mean, sometimes I feel like the conversation moves more smoothly in person. I don't know. Let's think about it, I guess. And I just to bring us back to that January meeting, you know, I am pretty sure that Will and I will both have, thanks Will for posting that. Will and I might both have a conflict on the night of January 11th.
Okay, so
But that would mean we won't have a quorum then, if John and Chad are out.
Yes, I don't know, Jen, if we can potentially think about a different day, or that gets logistically challenging.
no, we'll have to do that because you've got 2 large, one is the golf course, 497 Middle Turnpike. And then the other one is Wilmerite, which is King Hill Road and North Eagleville Road. So both are big projects that we'll really want to have. So when are with the following? Is there another, Chad, when are you coming back? We want you here.
Please.
Sorry,
He thought he
I was
going
trying to pull up, I was trying to pull up my calendar. So you
Yeah.
saw me, my look of panic as I couldn't find it. I am gone the 11th and the 12th, and that's it in terms of commitments that would interfere with this. So if we stick with Wednesdays, the Wednesday before the 4th, the Wednesday after the 18th, both work for me.
Okay, so
We could do a non-Wednesday also that same week.
Yeah.
Non-Wednesdays work as well. And if it's
would
a
the 10th would the 10th work
Yeah,
for
what about
folks,
the 10th?
except for John?
yes.
10th would work.
Okay.
Middle
Yeah,
school schedule fits, Will?
Yeah, I have it. I have it up right now. And there's nothing on the middle school schedule.
Oh my gosh.
And
All right, thank
I'm
you.
not back until the 20th, so none of that works for me. But, you know, one point here is I can actually usually participate, so I travel a lot more if it's remote, obviously, than in person. So there is some advantage to that.
New Zealand will be quite the time switch.
Well, actually, I just looked at it, and the issue is I leave New Zealand on the 11th, but it's only the 10th here. And then I arrive in Tahiti on the 12th.
Now you're really just rubbing it in.
Yeah, we gotta make him come. You have to come.
So
I don't know if I want to, you know, anyway.
it'll be early in the morning in Tahiti on the 12th, but the meeting is here on, anyway, so I don't, you know, I just look at it now, it's 3:00 in the afternoon tomorrow in New Zealand now. So if it was on the 10th, I might be able to
Yeah,
participate.
unless you're really compelled to join us, John. Like you're halfway around the world, literally. You can skip the meeting if you so choose.
Okay, I will move around. I've got so right now, our department staffs 9 committees, so I will move around. We've got ag committee on, so where am I here? Let's plan to do you guys on the 10th.
Okay,
Right.
great. I'm glad we figured that out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay,
All right, and so I haven't added that we're getting 3 big projects received through the Planning and Zoning / Inland Wetlands Agency, and they'll be on the story map. I usually wait until after they're received by IWA and PCC. So, but all 3 are multifamily developments, so.
okay. Any big municipal projects, public works, road work, or anything like that coming up? I guess not in the winter, no.
Not in the winter. I know that they're gonna be trying to replace that, or they will have to replace that Hunting Lodge Road culvert pretty soon, but that will be coming before the agency.
Okay.
And of course, we'll be doing some big projects out on South Eagleville Road, those improvements in front of the Eagleville Green project, so, but it's far off.
Okay. So does it feel crazy for you right now, Jen? Just
Sorry?
bananas? Does it feel crazy for you right now?
So I'm wondering, we're straying, as we always do, from
Yes.
the business part of the meeting
Yeah,
to
why don't we
the
adjourn?
catching up. So
Yeah.
I'm going to motion to adjourn, and then I think we can keep going off record.
Okay, great. I'm gonna,
We just need a second for that to work.
A
Second.
second.
Now we're officially done.
All right,
okay, meeting
9:26.
adjourned.
It was just one